When it comes to energy from the sun, do you know that we receive as much energy in 1 hour that we need to run the planet in 1 year? It's quite mind-boggling, isn't it? Thanks to the sun, we gain access to energy that is free, more or less free. It's also globally accessible and a fantastic source of completely clean energy. And this also makes it possible for a completely decentralized system to happen. And we know by now that only dramatic rise in renewable energy in combination with energy efficiency is going to help us get out of the jam that we put ourselves in. So it's now time to expand our horizons to the more global perspective, and I'm looking at the award winners here. I'd like to introduce to you the award winners. And first, before they enter the stage, I'd like to read out their backgrounds, and they're quite extensive, so bear with me. It's very interesting to hear what they've achieved so far. They couldn't choose one, the jury this year, so they choose 3. I think that's excellent. And this year's Gothenburg Award is awarded to Jeremy Leggett in the area of solar energy, and to Peter Hennicke and Beate Weber-Schuerholz in the field of energy efficiency. And in terms of Dr. Jeremy Leggett, he's an English businessman and opinion former who has done a tremendous amount of good things for our future and in terms of energy, and especially in solar energy. Dr. Jeremy Leggett has founded the company Solar Century, and also and Solar Century donates parts of its profits to an NGO called Solar Aid, which is an organization founded in 2006. And Solar Aid provides solar electricity, solar lamps to Africa. And Jeremy Leggett has made remarkable and enduring contributions in the transition that we really need to global low-carbon energy and the economy connected to that. Dr. Professor Peter Hennicke has been called the German bishop of energy efficiency, and he's been a pioneer in energy transition in Germany called the Energiewende. And already in 1985, Professor Dr. Peter Hennicke wrote a book called Die Energiewende ist möglich, already in 1985. And his research and participation in governmental expert committees and various groups has greatly influenced the company of Germans' work with energy efficiency and renewable energy. He has clarified the decisions to the decision makers, the various elements and levels that we require in order to reach the goals for a more sustainable future. He has held posts as head of the leading Wuppertal Institute for Climate, the Environment and Energy, and he is currently a member of the Club of Rome. He has also worked for the UN. Beate Weber-Schuerholz is the former mayor of Heidelberg. And Heidelberg has been awarded twice the title European Sustainable City. She's now the member of the European Parliament, chair of the Environmental Committee, and she was elected mayor of Heidelberg already in 1990, and she's been a mayor for 2 terms. And during this time, Heidelberg has really excelled in this work of sustainable development. And this work was very much connected with getting people, companies, and organizations to work together, which, as the panel here has demonstrated, is key to coming forward in this process. And just 2 weeks ago, Heidelberg was awarded Global Green City in the United Nations in New York City. And this prize was awarded for 20 years of engagement for the protection of the environment and the climate. That's not bad, huh? So please, we start with Dr. Jeremy Leggett. Please come up on stage. Give him a warm hand. Wonderful to have you here. We are so happy to have all you three prize winners with us today. Climate change, big topic. What is your hope for solving the energy challenges that we really need to solve in order to address climate change and to stay below the dangerous levels of greenhouse emissions?
I think if I have to pick, am I allowed two things?
Yes, please.
The first thing is, and here I agree very much with Thomas, I think now that we're in the transition, it has started in multiple countries, in multiple arenas, I think it can go so much faster than most of us can even imagine. I include myself in this. I mean, we're living in a world where Apple, for example, intends to be mass-producing solar-charged electric vehicles just 5 years from now, and their little power plants that will be hooked up together, and who knows where that kind of thing can lead. But the other thing that I believe is, you can't just use technology to fix this problem, and this is the second area where I'm really hopeful. Communities and religious leaders are now really getting fully involved in this, and I think it's not just the Catholic Church, and I'm not a Catholic, but the importance of the Pope's encyclical is vast, because he's essentially saying, we can deal with this problem, we have to deal with this problem, and by the way, we're not going to fix it just by counting emissions and regulating. We've got to re-engineer the operating manual of how we work, how we design modern capitalism. And I think that's a source for great hope going forward.
Well, hope we need indeed. Right. Please take a seat.
Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please give Professor Dr. Peter Hennicke a warm hand.
Great.
It's an honor to have you here too with us.
Thank you very much for
and I'm
inviting
actually
me.
pose the same question to you in terms of these challenges. What is your hope for solving the energy situation and to stay below the dangerous levels of climate emissions?
It's not a hope, it's a confidence.
Oh.
You are right, I'm a concerned optimist. There is a lot of concern, no doubt. But we listen to these optimistic stories, not only on the renewable side, but especially on the efficiency side. And let me preach a little bit in the direction of efficiency, putting it together with renewables. And we have a great new momentum on the political arena. We have the SDG encouraging agenda, which is very closely connected to energy and resource efficiency. And I'm quite convinced we will have a good outcome in Paris at COP21.
Lovely music.
Nevertheless, that there were disastrous events in the last days. Having been in many parts of the world, I feel that the momentum is going on, not only in Sweden. You are great, and I listen to all these wonderful...
We don't mind having company.
You are really great, and I'm a huge fan of Swedish development. But you, Denmark, and Germany, we should unite to push the Energiewende in Europe. Then it might fly, maybe a little bit earlier.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please take a seat, Professor Doctor. Beate Weber-Schuerholz, former mayor of Heidelberg. Please give her a warm hand. An honor to have you with us too.
Thank you.
So what is your hope in this situation?
Well,
energy connected to climate change.
Well, it was so interesting to have all these people here
Wasn't
to listen to them. I think we should have more time to discuss with each other and with you.
There's a break. There's always a break. We can talk more.
That's necessary. Okay, well, I think the most important thing is to convince people that this is not a threat, but a chance for developing, a chance to modernize and to optimize not only industry, but also society. It's first of all, it's a change in your mind. Mm-hmm. It's much more than technique and money. It's you have to change your mind, and then you have to cross all sorts of borders. My colleagues already spoke about the United Nations, the European, the provinces, the local level, the national level. Sorry, I forgot about that one. But in environmental questions, in environmental matters, national borders don't really count much. And then you have to, another cross-sectoral issue is crossing the different interests. In every society, in every department, you have different, you spoke about that, Elizabeth, the different sectors, education. You have to bring construction, you have to bring education, transport, energy, all the different sectors together. And they are used to their thinking and
silos.
have to watch sideways. And, well, that's the most important, these are the most important matters that we have to deal with.
It's so wonderful that all three of you are so hopeful. Let's give them a warm hand again. And before I leave the floor to Alan and the prize winners, I'd like to encourage you to Twitter your questions. I will be taking them down here in the corner and breathing them out to the panel after the talk.
Great. Thank you, Katarina. And goodness sakes, welcome, Jeremy and Peter and Beate. It's so wonderful to have you here in this little corner of the stage. I hope you feel warm enough on this cold November day.
Everything is okay.
Good. You know, this sofa is it's a very special sofa. It's a Swedish invention. It absorbs the body heat from the previous panel, stores it, and then re-emits it at the appropriate time. So we're going to export that soon. Now, all three of you have heard the challenge of the youth and the example that they're both looking for and setting, and we're going to come back to youth at the end of our time together. But you also heard that there are a couple of rather difficult problems that we have to solve in terms of accelerating beyond what we've currently achieved with the Energiewende. And I'm hoping that by the end of our seminar, within 25 minutes, we will have essentially solved these problems and people can go forth and continue changing the world even faster than you have done. So, Peter Hennicke, I'm going to, Jeremy, I'll turn to you first if I could, because I know that from our previous conversations, and you mentioned already something connected to this, that you were recently in Silicon Valley. All of you travel incredibly. And you said you saw quite a number of things there that were surprising and a bit exciting about that, and unexpected. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Silicon Valley is one of the great inventive hubs that is going to be central to this big struggle to survive climate change. And you've got all the things there that you need to make the solution work. But if I could just pick one example, I was in a hub, an incubator for young entrepreneurs, green entrepreneurs in Oakland. And these are people of the same age as the wonderful folk who made this film. And, you know, they're steeped in all the things that you need, all the tools that you need to engage in the opportunities of this energy transition. So they come from business schools, they've got strong business backgrounds, but they understand all the paraphernalia of the information age. And one of the things that is going to be so important for us is to overlay on the energy transition the kinds of things that are happening, have been happening in the information revolution.
What are we talking about here? Are we talking about apps on our iPhones? And
yeah, I mean, this is my point about it's difficult to even imagine. I'm a man of a certain age, and the global energy industry is run basically by men of a certain age who are completely unfamiliar with a lot of these things. And this is one of the reasons for great hope. And you look at some of the companies that have emerged in California, and you know, if you're of a mind to be impressed by statistics of values of companies, you know, these have come from nowhere in a few years and are now worth billions of dollars. And they've done things like leverage people's lofts and spare bedrooms. I'm talking about Airbnb.
Yeah.
And where's the energy equivalent of that? Yeah, we haven't seen it. but it is coming. And it's probably coming to an IKEA store near to you soon.
So the technical innovation is taking off from places like that. But Peter Hennicke, I know that you've just recently arrived from Japan, and you were on a kind of a global or Asian tour of India, China, Japan, where you advise major energy initiatives. Is there an energy transition happening there too? Were there any surprising developments that you saw that you can report to us?
Yes, you're right. It was a small trip. I started in India, then went to China, and then to Japan. The main message coming out of these talks is that the Energiewende is not a problem of Sweden. It's not a problem of Germany. But it's happening in all the three huge emerging countries or high-tech countries like Japan. Let me give you some examples. The first one, I was struck by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in Delhi. In Delhi. It's the most advanced and good lesson learned institution which fosters not only energy efficiency in the industrial sector, but it conducts the biggest LED program in the world. So it's quite amazing. And the next one is the Indians know energy efficiency is important, renewables are important, but resource efficiency is even more challenging. So they installed a resource panel like UNEP did for the world. And this is a more integrated view, how to decouple lifestyle questions, happiness, living standards from the use of all resources, not only energy, but critical metals and everything else. And then going to China, I was struck by what they call the ecological modernization. I was the international co-chair together with Professor Xulan from Tsinghua, and we thought about a heart on the core of the transformation of China. That means how to establish a new government's capacity to transform this gigantic, huge country in a more green direction. What I learned is that the announcement that there could be a peak of carbon dioxide in 2030 is too cautious. It might be much earlier, and that's a good lesson for all people who are looking on the still growing carbon dioxide emissions. And the third one, that might be the interesting one, because, you know, Japan, or somebody in Japan likes nuclear very much. They want to restart nuclear as much as possible. But we managed to get a close contact to METI, in the Ministry of Economics, to establish a cooperation council on Japan and Germany for 2 years, looking into the transformation of the energy sector to solve their problems, which are high rising prices, carbon dioxide goes up, the import dependency goes up. So they have a lot of problems, and we have problems as well. We don't have the capacities for the low-hanging fruits of maybe storage, maybe of e-mobility and so on, so we can learn a lot from Japan as well. So that's great.
My goodness.
Learn from each other.
Yeah, so we're really getting a picture of a global transformation that's not just happening in Germany and, and Sweden. And I think our audience is probably beginning to get a sense of our panel here, why they won this award, the incredible energy and command of the issues that they have, and how they trot the globe on this work. Beate, I know that you work in China as well. You're very active in many different venues, but the one that struck me when I was reading about your recent work was Guatemala. That you were involved in a Latin American advisory group on climate and energy. Is there an energy transition happening in Guatemala, and what does that look like?
Well, I wouldn't put it immediately on the national level. The interesting thing was the local level was active. And that's exactly what has been discussed before on your panel. You have so many leaders on local ground that have the courage, the will, the strength to do something, and the creativity. And what really struck me most was in Guatemala, it was a meeting of Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. They founded a network supported by others, but nevertheless, and there were representatives from Chile and Argentinian cities networks. And they all spoke this, they didn't only speak Spanish together, the same language, but they spoke the same language, political language on climate change and what we can do about it. And they were all extremely enthusiastic, and they were all willing to act in spite of lack of enthusiasm of their governments sometimes, and not just waiting for orders coming from above, but doing things because they saw in their streets, they saw in their energy needs, they saw in the bills they had to pay for energy, and they saw when they traveled or when they met colleagues all over the world in organizations like ECLE or others, they realized we can do something. We don't have to wait, like every individual can do something. So this is something you don't have to wait for. You don't have to, believe and obey. You can be active, and that was the most fascinating experience everywhere. In China as well, there were so many colleagues. The only difference between the Chinese mayors and ours is, for instance, we are about to construct, it's already under construction, a sort of new suburb, totally and without additional energy, passive house standards, and it's for 7,000 inhabitants and 8,000 jobs.
Outside of Heidelberg.
In Heidelberg, within Heidelberg. But when this Chinese mayor I once met in New Zealand stood up and said, presented himself and said, well, I'm sorry, I have to apologize. I only come from a smaller Chinese city. We only have 2.5 million inhabitants. So it made some difference. And then later in China, I served at a sort of a comparable body. These mayors planned suburbs for 500,000. And so this, for European standards, even Gothenburg isn't that big. So this makes things a bit difficult and a bit different.
You know, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we are in Sweden, and I just have to know, how do you see Sweden? We like to think we're leading on this, but are we still, or have we fallen behind these extraordinary developments? Are we even on the right track with our own energy developments here? Anybody care to speak to that?
Yeah. I would not dare to say that you have 9 years of stagnation. That's the wording of Thomas. That would be not too much polite. But you know, the role model of Swedish energy advancing with high standards for buildings, having the privilege to have a lot of hydro for electricity, is a little bit connected with a problem which should be solved, having twice as much electricity consumption per capita than Germany seems to be a little bit too high, to be quite polite. And if you put it to the standard of Germany, you can get rid of nuclear immediately. So there are losers and winners when you talk about that question. But just to encourage you to keep to this leading position which Sweden had for the last decades. And I think this risk minimizing strategy has to be solved.
We might have to raise the bar by lowering the goal towards which we're heading. Thank you for that, Peter. Jeremy, I'm curious, when you listened to the Swedish colleagues and also your German colleagues, do you experience in the UK the same struggles that you've been hearing about? What's the picture like there for you compared to us?
Well, let me make a point about Sweden first, because I think one of the reasons why I've gone from being a pessimist about these issues a few years ago to a qualified optimist, really hopeful that we can win the carbon war, as I put it. I had too many toys.
That's the name of his book, by the way,
yeah.
Available for free download. Just Google Jeremy Leggett winning the carbon war. And
all my female friends tell me I had too many toy soldiers when I was a boy, and they're probably right. So I apologize for the title if it offends anyone. But You know, one of the reasons, there are so many reasons right across the stage of this great epic drama why we can be optimistic. And one is the corporate world. So if you know, when I started out a quarter of a century ago, virtually every company was there either to obfuscate or to plain stall and try and torpedo the process. That's what it was like as an environmentalist 25 years ago. Now, of the top 100 companies in the world, 52 of them are actively promoting what we're trying to do to different degrees. And you pick the front runners, and you have to, you know, you pretty soon come down to Unilever and IKEA. And IKEA, as I'm sure everyone here knows, has the goal of 100% renewable powering its operations globally by, wait for it, 2020, 5 years from now. And, you know, they're taking it seriously. They're really going for it. My company has the privilege of, you know, working for them, with them, behind their brand. And they're deadly serious. And if every corporation in the world did that, had that kind of goal, right. And of course energy efficiency is vitally important because it reduces the mountain for them, we would be solving this problem very quickly.
Hands. Yeah.
So, you know, Sweden has a front-running corporate company. And you asked me about the UK. Do I have to answer?
You don't have to answer.
We're on.
Actually. And in fact, I'll be diplomatic. Time is actually running down, so we'll let you skip that naughty problem of its own. Instead, I'll ask if I can get this panel to try to solve this problem that we heard earlier. None of you seems to find it as troubling in your initial comments as our Swedish panel did, of the need for a new business model around energy to make the economics of it add up and the transactions work in a world where renewables are getting so cheap, efficiency is getting so good, and the big utilities are wondering what to do with themselves. Is there a solution that we should be aiming for, or should we just let things keep developing the way they are? And what's the answer?
Well, if we start thinking about industry or business not just being the big enterprises, but also the small ones, for instance, the small and medium ones, so between 5 and 400, 500 employees. So I think the important thing is to translate what you know into very practical action on site, because the smaller ones, for instance, they don't have an environmental department. They don't have environmental management. They don't know anything about the environment if they are not, as private persons, interested in these issues. For instance, if you ask a baker, what we did in Heidelberg, because we thought a bit about psychology, if you tell them, now you have to deal with the environment, they just say, sorry, this movement in Germany means you're a bit stupid. I don't have anything to do with the environment. I'm a baker, and I have 2 bakers in my room, and we work together, and that's it. But then we started talking to him, and we brought a group. We had special programs for these different crafts, and then later for small and medium enterprises. And we went together into their baking, into the room where they worked. And there were 2 scientists, which always give a sort of neutrality, not like the politicians or the administration. And administration always comes and sort of threatens with fines or fees or something, or they always have the feeling they have to pay something. And they wouldn't like us immediately when we go into their working rooms. And we went together with this academia. Then we had other businesses we asked to join us, and these people and administration together, and we looked around where are possibilities to optimize. And suddenly this bakery ended up with a just very easy behavioral change, just switching on the oven later than it used to, because they were afraid that the necessary heat wouldn't be reached in time. Then they set a simple little alarm of $20 or 20 euro. They set it so it would be heated in time to reach the temperature when they had the dough ready. You know what? That saved the energy of a 4-person household per year and reduced their costs. They suddenly realized, oh gosh, the environment, maybe it has something to do with me. And that happened to others. So, and we went on with different strategies, different people we addressed. And
So, Beate, you changed Heidelberg one bakery at a time. Is that right?
Well, we didn't just start with a little roll, but,
No, but
we ended up with the university clinics to participate. But overall, it's more than 150 enterprises that took part in it. So it was really a broad movement in the city, and people started thinking about modernizing their jobs, and that was, I think, the most important step.
Peter, I heard a similar story from you earlier about the importance of the smaller actors, and we heard that from our earlier panel as well, that we tend to think that in order to solve the business model problem, we have to save the big corporations or help them change. But we're hearing a story coming out of this panel of a much more diverse and pluralistic approach. Does that align with your thinking about this?
Let me split the question in two parts. One is, how can we scale up all these success stories? One very important model or frame condition, in my opinion, is the feed-in law, which we have in Germany.
The feed-in tariff.
Feed-in tariff. Yeah. It puts the opportunity to the normal citizens, not to the farmers as well, to create cooperatives. We now have 1,000 cooperatives.
1,000 energy cooperatives.
And it's an exponential growth. It's still going on. And the main driver behind this business model is the feed-in law, the tariff, which gives clear incentives. Everybody is aware that he gets maybe 8 cents per kilowatt hour for putting photovoltaics on the roof, or maybe about 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour for a wind power plant. So these incentive schemes and the clear roadmap of the whole energy transformation, which has to be decided by the government, that's important. That everybody who wants to invest his money knows, yes, these are the targets and we're heading for the targets. Another one I think is very important, especially for Germany. We have 800 utilities. 800. Very much on a local level, but we have those 4 guys, the gang of 4, and they are in troubles.
The gang of 4 means the 4 very large utility companies.
One part of the gang of 4 is unfortunately
one of which may be Swedish owned.
But the bigger ones are E.ON and RWE. Yeah. I preached to them since many decades that we should change our business opportunities to help the customers to save energy. That means to enlarge the chain to the customer, to the energy services, and to earn money by selling services instead of building new power plants. Now they realize that there is a business opportunity in it, but of course there must be a recovery mechanism to get the costs back, but the energy efficiency, the megawatts are so cheap, it's between 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, maybe 5 cents per kilowatt hour, cheaper than any supply of electricity. So we should help them to earn their profits.
The best source of energy is not to have to make it.
Absolutely. They have the technological know-how, they have the capital, and we should help them, the big guys, but the 800 utilities as well, to be engaged in the transformation of the whole energy system.
Jeremy, when you listen to this, what we've heard is small actors, government policies, feed-in tariffs. You're running a business in a country that's not well known for being a friendly policy environment on these issues, and yet you're still doing well. Is the answer government policy to unleash this accelerated transformation?
Well, of course, it's helped enormously, but every form of energy, everyone here knows this, every form of energy needs subsidy. The difference with renewables is that we're not going to need subsidies for very much longer. And already solar is the cheapest option in many places around the world, and in a few years' time it's going to be the cheapest option in most places around the world. And you hook that up with batteries and off you go. I mean, it's a challenge for us to get over to people how this is going to change the face of the energy industry. you just pick one report off the shelf by one of the investment banks, UBS. They've done a big study on how you combine solar with storage and electric vehicles. And they're saying that across the OECD, you're going to be able to have a solar roof, an electric vehicle, a bank of batteries that will do everything you need in your home. And the capital outlay on that you'll get back in less than 7 years. And the crucial thing is that the annual rate of return, no subsidies in sight, will be north of 7%. And none of the banks or any of the bonus cult temples are going to be able to come close to helping people that way. So big as the community movement is right now, I mean, it's going to devolve down to the household. The utilities will be the households. And, you know, I have friends in these big energy companies, and I do feel a bit sorry for them. This is a huge challenge. It's not obvious that these people are going to be able to find their way through the transition, even if they have the good sense to realize that there is no alternative.
This is this is a wonderful discussion, and I would love to continue it, but it's going to probably have to continue in its substance anyway over the breaks and other times. I'd like to just give each of you a chance to make a kind of a very short closing statement, particularly speaking to the youth who are so engaged on these issues. What advice do you have for them? And then we'll take some questions from Twitter before moving to our coffee break. So, Beate, maybe we'll start with you. If you were going to answer the youth in our video today about how they can achieve what you've achieved, what would you tell them? What do you tell them?
Well, I would just support what they did first, because they looked very good, and I think we can be very confident that they will manage the future much better than we obviously did. And our generation and the last one spoiled the earth, so we must always be aware of that, so we are not too reliable as giving advice to the young ones. First of all.
Okay.
I think the best way to prepare them is to really keep their eyes open, to do what they realize is right and necessary, and not just wait for others to tell them, and not wait for others to do. Very often people prefer to look at examples of others. Why don't you set the example? So you can always be the first one to do something. Sometimes it can go wrong.
Sure.
But if it's all these small steps, then if a tiny little step doesn't go straight, but a little bit to the left or to the right, it doesn't really matter. It's not too bad. It's only the very big ones. Look at the big mergers. We allowed our economy in this world to have big mergers and to immediately lose billions of dollars and to sack thousands of people. These were really big steps. I think we can make much, much smaller mistakes without spoiling the earth immediately.
Thank you very much, Beate. Peter Hennicke.
It would take 1 hour to bring all the good wishes and maybe some educational advices to all these young people, and we do it when we teach students, and I had the privilege to do it in Lund with highly educated PhD students. That was great, and I will go back to Lund 10 days from now. To be a little bit humble, what they told us, and brave as well. We need more visibility for the invisible negawatt.
More visibility for the negawatt.
The negawatt, how to
Efficient
avoid
watt.
energy. You can't see it, how you avoid it. You can only measure it. Jeremy and the community has this sexy blue things on the walls, on the roofs, everywhere, and everybody would agree, oh, nice to have it. But the negawatts, where are they? These are circulation pumps in the cellar, absolutely unsexy. So I would like the young people to think about design, marketing strategies, social marketing campaigns, how to make the invisible visible, how to make it to feel that we need it. And maybe no, I leave it by
that's
that's
good.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Jeremy, what do you have to say to our youth?
Well, I'm thinking of all the young people that work in the company at Solar Century, and it's difficult to answer the question without sounding like a self-important idiot. But you know, I think this idea of giving profits, companies giving profits to help people in other countries, is so potentially powerful. And that's what I would invite young people to do. If you're setting up companies of your own, or you go and work in other people's companies, why on earth can't you give 5% of the profits to something like we did at Solar Century, setting up a charity for solar lighting or any other thing, you know, that helps people in those countries and deals with environmental problems? It ought to be doable. We started doing it when we were a tiny company. This year, you know, we've given £250,000, and you could make a whole new form of capital in the world for social good, dedicated to social good, if you did this. So that would be the one thought. And then, you know, what you can do with it. I mean, Solar Aid, the charity that we created, within 3 years became the lead retailer of solar lighting across the whole of a continent, based out of just 2 countries. And that was mostly done by young people, not men of a certain age sitting in an armchair in London, but young people in the field in Nairobi and Lusaka and all the rest of it. I mean, there's so much that can be done. And it's a very, very exciting time.
It is.
To be young.
And your comments have been very, very exciting to me, so I want to thank you for those. Katarina, well, we have just a few minutes before the break. Have there come any interesting questions from Twitter?
I'm afraid too many.
Too many. Let's take 1 or 2.
Yes, please. Thank you so much for sharing your questions on Twitter. You, of course, can go in and read them and follow them yourselves on Twitter. One big one for all 3 of you. What are your thoughts and expectations for Paris and COP21?
Peter.
Yep. The caveat, I said the same thing about Copenhagen, and like many people, I was catastrophically wrong. This time I do think it's different. So many ducks have been lined up, so many powerful forces are pointing in the right direction. I think there will be a very strong signal sent. It obviously won't be enough to get us 2 degrees, but it will get us on that trajectory of hope, the winning of the carbon war, as I describe it in this free download book. And I'm crossing my fingers when I say it, but I expect to see grown men and women, diplomats representing their countries, in floods of tears of happiness on the final morning of the climate summit in Paris.
I think we should, yes.
That's all. Just visualize that moment. That's wonderful.
That was such an optimistic moment. Maybe we should take the next question and just let it sit there.
Why not? Good idea. Christer Ove poses this question. The global economy and fossils are interdependent. Should we link renewable energy to a new economy based on transparency?
Well, transparency not only according to energy, but to everything. I think transparency is...
Maybe this is a good time to just reform politics.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's necessary for every decision. If you believe in the reason of mankind, if the reason, people being reasonable, the knowledge is there, the technical possibilities are there. So the only way of pushing decisions forward, pushing changes in behavior forward is by discussing it openly, putting all the information to the open, discuss this information properly, and then base your decision on knowledge. That's the only way of really dealing sensibly with what you know and what you have and where your responsibility is.
Thank you. Peter seems eager to answer this.
Yes, please.
As well.
If possible, let me add one idea to that really great challenge of COP21. The reason why I'm more optimistic than concerned, is that humankind is now ready to identify the co-benefits of climate mitigation. If you are in China, and if you look into an area which is so full with smog, you feel it when you come down from the airport, where the soil is polluted or the water is polluted, and there are 1.3 billion people who feel it every day, then they know to reduce fossil fuels, to step forward to renewables and to efficiency will solve all these pollutant problems as well. At the same time, they reduce the import dependency, they reduce a lot of other risks. So this is the great hope, that we can identify how many premature deaths we can avoid by putting our energy in renewables, in efficiency, and that's, in my opinion, besides the cost regression of renewables, the most important driver of COP21. So let's step in that direction.
I think that great hope is a great note on which to go to coffee, don't you?
Absolutely. We have stretched our mind so much now that we need to stretch our bodies. So please, refreshments. The bell will sound when it's time for you to re-enter the facilities. 45-minute break. Please enjoy.
Okay.